Captain Jake Morrison stared at the endless black void through the observation window of the Deep Space Monitoring Station Frontier Watch. The year was 2387, and humanity had spread across 12 worlds beyond Earth, but the universe still felt impossibly vast and empty. Jake had been stationed at this remote outpost for 3 years now, watching for any signs of trouble that might threaten the human colonies scattered across this section of space. The station was small, but well equipped, housing a crew of 24 specialists who kept watch over the outer rim of human territory. Jake had served in the Colonial Defense Force for 15 years, and this assignment was supposed to be quiet, almost boring. Most days passed without incident, with only routine maintenance and system checks to break the monotony. Lisa Kane sat at her communications console, her fingers dancing across the controls as she monitored the various frequencies and channels that carried messages between the human worlds. She had been Jake's communications officer for 2 years, and her sharp ears had caught more than one important transmission that others might have missed. Today started like any other, with the usual chatter between merchant vessels and colony administrators. Ryan Brooks occupied the tactical station, his eyes constantly scanning the sensor displays for any signs of unknown ships or objects. As the station's tactical specialist, he was responsible for identifying potential threats long before they could pose any danger to the colonies. His military training made him naturally suspicious of anything that didn't belong in their sector of space. Amy Foster worked at the science station, analyzing the data streams that flowed in from the automated sensor buoys scattered throughout the system. She was the youngest member of the senior staff, but her expertise in xenobiology and physics made her invaluable to the mission. She had joined the crew, hoping to make first contact with alien life, though most scientists believed such contact was still decades away. The morning shift was halfway through when Lisa's console began displaying unusual readings. She frowned at the screen, adjusting the filters and amplifiers to get a clearer signal. The transmission was coming from outside human space, far beyond the established shipping lanes and colony worlds. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," Lisa called out, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the station systems. "It's a transmission, but the frequency and encoding are unlike anything in our databases." Jake moved to her station, studying the wavelength patterns displayed on her screen. The signal was definitely artificial, showing clear signs of intelligent origin, but the modulation was completely foreign to human technology. "How far out is it coming from?" "Based on the signal strength and propagation delay, I'd estimate about 47 light years from our current position," Lisa replied, her fingers working to isolate and enhance the transmission. "The signal appears to be on a broad-spectrum broadcast, like a distress call." Amy left her station and joined them, her excitement barely contained. "This could be it, Captain. This could be first contact with an alien species." Ryan remained at his post, but turned his attention to the long-range sensors. "I'm not detecting any ships or objects in that direction, but at that distance, even our best sensors would have trouble picking up anything smaller than a small moon." Jake felt his heart rate increase as the implications sank in. If this was indeed a signal from an alien civilization, it would change everything for humanity. But something about Lisa's description of it being like a distress call made him uneasy. "Can you decode it?" "I'm working on it," Amy said, already transferring the data to her analysis systems. "The mathematical principles should be universal, but the language and encoding methods will take time to figure out." For the next 6 hours, the entire senior staff worked together to decode the mysterious transmission. Amy's computers ran countless algorithms, searching for patterns and mathematical relationships that might serve as a translation key. Lisa fine-tuned the reception equipment to capture every possible detail of the signal, while Ryan monitored the surrounding space for any signs of additional activity. Jake found himself pacing the small command center, unable to sit still as history unfolded around him. He had always imagined that first contact would be a moment of wonder and celebration, but the urgency in Lisa's voice when she first detected the signal suggested something much darker. As the hours passed, fragments of the transmission began to make sense. Amy's translation programs identified basic mathematical concepts, then simple words and phrases. The breakthrough came when she recognized what appeared to be astronomical coordinates, pointing to a star system that human telescopes had catalogued as Kepler 442. "Captain, I think I've got something," Amy announced, her voice shaking with excitement and fear. "This is definitely a distress call, and it's coming from the Kepler 442 system. The species calling themselves the Zelani are under attack." The main screen lit up with the translated text as Amy's computers processed more of the signal. The words that appeared sent a chill through everyone on the bridge. The Zelani were describing a systematic extermination of their people by something called the hegemony. Their homeworld was under siege, their cities burning, their people dying. "By the millions. They're asking for help," Lisa whispered, reading the translation as it appeared. "They're broadcasting to anyone who might be listening, begging for someone to save them." Jake stared at the screen, watching as more details emerged from the alien transmission. The Zelani described themselves as a peaceful species that had never known war until the hegemony arrived. They spoke of 6 different alien species working together to conquer and enslave weaker civilizations across the galaxy. "How long has this been going on?" Jake asked. Amy checked her calculations. "Based on the timestamp data I can make out, this signal was transmitted approximately 3 weeks ago. But Captain, there's something else. The Zelani aren't just asking for help randomly. They've detected evidence of our space travel and know we exist." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. Humanity had been discovered by aliens, but not in the way anyone had imagined. Instead of peaceful first contact, they were being drawn into what appeared to be a galactic war between conquerors and victims. "Sir," Ryan said from his station, "I'm picking up additional transmissions from the same source. The signal strength is weakening, which suggests their transmission. Equipment is being damaged or destroyed." Jake made the decision that would change the course of human history. "Lisa, prepare a priority transmission to Earth. Include everything we've decoded so far. Amy, keep working on the translation. I want to know everything the Zelani are telling us about this hegemony." As the Frontier Watch crew worked frantically to decode more of the alien distress call, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was about to face its greatest challenge. The Zelani's desperate plea for help had reached Earth, and somehow Jake knew that humanity's response would determine not just the fate of an alien species, but the future of human civilization itself. The black void outside the observation window suddenly seemed much less empty and far more dangerous. Admiral Helen Carter stood in the secure briefing room at Colonial Defense Command headquarters, staring at the holographic display that showed the decoded Zelani transmission. The room was filled with Earth's top military leaders, government officials, and scientists, all trying to process the reality that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. The transmission had arrived from Jake Morrison's station just 18 hours ago, and since then, the entire leadership structure of human civilization had been turned upside down. President Nathan Cole had called an emergency session of the United Earth Council. While military commanders scrambled to assess the threat, this new information represented Dr. Carol Hayes, Earth's leading xenobiologist, had been working without sleep since the transmission arrived. Her team had been analyzing every fragment of biological data the Zelani had included with their distress call. The results were both fascinating and heartbreaking. The Zelani are remarkably similar to humans, Caral reported to the assembled group. They're carbon-based, oxygen breathing, and their brain structure suggests intelligence levels comparable to our own. But more importantly, their social structure shows they're a peaceful species that has never developed advanced military technology. Holographic displays shifted to show images that the Zelani had transmitted, along with their plea for help. The pictures showed beautiful cities with flowing architecture that seemed to blend seamlessly with the natural landscape. There were images of Zelani families, their faces showing expressions of joy and love that were instantly recognizable to any human. But then came the images of destruction. The same cities burning under orbital bombardment, the same families, running in terror as massive alien ships filled their skies. The contrast was devastating, and several people in the room looked away from the display. Commander Steve Parker, who had been selected to lead humanity's first diplomatic mission to an alien species, studied the transmission data with growing concern. "They're not just asking for help," he said quietly. "They're sharing everything they know about this hegemony in the hope that whoever receives their message will be able to do something." The information the Zelani had provided about the hegemony was extensive and terrifying. The alliance consisted of 6 species that had been conquering and enslaving weaker civilizations for over 1,000 years. They had perfected the art of warfare, using overwhelming force and advanced technology to crush any resistance. Intelligence. Analyst Kate Reynolds had been working around the clock to analyze the hegemony's military capabilities and tactics. Her findings painted a grim picture of humanity's chances if they chose to intervene. "The hegemony operates with a simple philosophy," Kate explained to the Council. "They classify all species as either useful servants or obstacles to be removed. They've never encountered significant resistance because they choose their targets carefully, always ensuring they have overwhelming superiority before attacking." President Cole leaned forward in his chair, his face showing the weight of the decision that lay before them. "What about their technology? How do we compare?" Kate's expression grew even more serious. "In terms of pure technology, they're probably more advanced than us. But their tactics are predictable, based on facing technologically inferior opponents. They've never had to adapt to fighting an enemy that could match their capabilities." The debate that followed was intense and emotional. Some council members argued for caution, pointing out that humanity had no obligation to risk their own survival for a species they had never met. Others insisted that standing by while genocide occurred was morally unacceptable. Admiral Carter listened to the arguments while studying the tactical data. Her military experience told her that intervention would be costly and dangerous, but her conscience wouldn't let her ignore the Zelani's desperate plea. The debate took a dramatic turn when Kate Reynolds received an urgent message from her analysis team. Her face went pale as she read the decoded information, and she immediately requested permission to address the council. "We've just finished decoding another section of the hegemony communications that the Zelani intercepted," Kate announced. "The hegemony has been monitoring human expansion for the past 50 years. They've already classified our species as a future threat that will require elimination." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This was no longer just about helping the Zelani. Humanity was already marked for destruction by the hegemony, whether they intervened or not. According to the intelligence the Zelani gathered, the hegemony has scheduled human space for what they call processing once they finish with the Zelani. Kate continued. "They plan to eliminate our colonies one by one, starting with the outer settlements and working their way toward Earth." General Mike Torres, head of Earth's military forces, stood up abruptly. "How long do we have?" "Based on their timeline and the current situation in the Kepler 442 system, probably 6 months before they turn their attention to human space," Kate replied. "Maybe less if they finish with the Zelani sooner than expected." The revelation changed everything. President Cole looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. seeing his own determination reflected in their expressions. "It seems the decision has been made for us. We're going to fight them anyway, so we might as well do it while we have allies." Dr. Carol Hayes spoke up from her position at the science station. "There's something else you should know. The Zilani have been trying to establish direct communication with us. They've detected our response signals and are attempting to create a real-time communication link." Admiral Carter felt her heart rate increase. "You mean we can talk to them directly?" "Commander, Parker's team has been working on establishing a stable connection," Carol replied. "They should have it ready within the hour." The next hour passed in a blur of preparation and nervous anticipation. When the communication link was finally established, the entire council watched as the main screen flickered to life, showing the image of an alien being for the first time in human history. Elder Zeshtai appeared on the screen, his large eyes showing exhaustion and desperation, but also a flicker of hope. When he spoke, the translation software converted his words into clear English. "We are the Zilani of the world you call Kepler 442b, he said, his voice carrying centuries of wisdom and recent trauma. "We sent our call into the darkness not knowing if anyone would hear, but hoping that somewhere among the stars there might be others who believe that innocent life should not be destroyed for the ambitions of conquerors." Commander Parker stepped forward to respond. "Elder Zeshtai, we are humans from the world called Earth. We have received your message, and we want to help, but we need to understand what we're facing." The conversation that followed was heartbreaking and informative. Elder Zeshtai described watching their moon colonies being destroyed from orbit, their orbital cities burning like dying stars. He spoke of millions of Zilani refugees fleeing into deep space with no hope of finding safety. But he also shared crucial intelligence about the hegemony's weaknesses. Their ships were powerful but not invincible. Their tactics were rigid and predictable. Most importantly, they had never faced an enemy that fought with the desperation and creativity that came from defending one's home. "We have perhaps 2 million of our people left," Elder Zeshtai said, his voice heavy with grief. "Our world is dying, our cities are ruins, but we still have our ships and our knowledge. If you will help us, we will share everything we know." About the hegemony, President Cole made the decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. "Elder Zeshtai, humanity will not stand by while innocents are slaughtered. We're coming to help you, and together we'll make sure the hegemony learns that some species refuse to be conquered." As the communication ended, Admiral Carter began issuing orders to mobilize the Colonial Defense Fleet. The weight of decision had been lifted from their shoulders, but the weight of responsibility had just begun. Admiral Ben Harrison stood on the bridge of the flagship Earth's Wrath, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace through the main view screen. Behind him, the largest military force in human history prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of 2 species. A Colonial Defense Fleet had been assembled in just 4 weeks, a logistical miracle that had pushed human shipbuilding capabilities to their absolute limits. 57 ships now traveled through hyperspace toward the Kepler 442 system, ranging from massive dreadnoughts to fast attack vessels and support ships. Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the dreadnought Retribution, the most powerful warship humanity had ever constructed. Her ship bristled with kinetic weapons, missile launchers, and the experimental plasma cannons that Dr. Peter Cole's team had developed specifically for this mission. Dr. Cole worked frantically in the fleet's mobile laboratories, adapting human weapons technology for use against the hegemony. The intelligence provided by the Zilani had given them crucial insights into enemy ship design and defensive capabilities. The hegemony relied heavily on energy shields and beam weapons, technologies that were vulnerable to the kinetic and nuclear, weapons that humans had perfected over centuries of warfare. The good news is that our weapons should be effective against their ships, Dr. Cole reported to Admiral Harrison during the daily briefing. The bad news is that they outnumber us significantly, and their individual ships are larger and more heavily armed than ours. Harrison studied the tactical displays showing the enemy force disposition around Kepler 442b. The hegemony had deployed over 150 ships to complete the extermination of the Zelani, including massive command vessels that were easily 10 times the size of Earth's largest dreadnought. What about their tactics? Harrison asked his tactical officer, Commander Alex Foster. Based on the battle records the Zelani shared with us, they prefer overwhelming frontal assaults, Foster replied. They surround their target and hammer it with concentrated firepower until resistance collapses. It's effective against technologically inferior opponents, but it leaves them vulnerable to coordinated attacks from multiple directions. Harrison nodded, remembering the military history he had studied throughout his career. Humanity's greatest victories had often come when they were outnumbered and outgunned, forced to rely on superior tactics and the willingness to take risks that their enemies wouldn't consider. The plan Harrison had developed was based on classic human military doctrine: divide and conquer. The fleet would split into multiple strike groups, each targeting different sections of the hegemony formation. While the enemy focused on one group, the others would strike from unexpected angles, creating chaos and confusion in their ranks. Captain Linda Hayes commanded the stealth destroyer Shadow Strike, one of the newest additions to the human fleet. Her ship was equipped with experimental cloaking technology that would allow her to get close to enemy command vessels without being detected. Her mission was to eliminate the hegemony's command structure in the opening moments of the battle. As the fleet neared the end of its hyperspace journey, Harrison addressed all ships over the communication system. In a few minutes, we'll drop out of hyperspace and face an enemy that has been terrorizing this galaxy for over 1,000 years. They believe they're invincible because they've never faced anyone willing to fight back with everything they have. The Admiral paused, looking around at the determined faces of his bridge crew. But they've never faced humanity. They've never encountered a species that considers freedom worth dying for. Today, we're going to show them what happens when they threaten innocent lives. The transition from hyperspace to normal space was violent and disorienting, but the human fleet emerged in perfect formation. The sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The Kepler 442 system was filled with ships, debris, and the burning remains of what had once been a thriving civilization. The planet itself was scarred by orbital bombardment, its surface glowing with the heat of countless impacts. Massive hegemony vessels surrounded the world like predators circling. Wounded prey, their weapons continuing to rain destruction down on the few remaining Zelani strongholds. Sensors are picking up massive energy signatures from the enemy fleet, reported Foster. 147 ships, just as the Zelani intelligence indicated. They're arranged in a standard siege formation around the planet. Harrison felt his jaw tighten as he watched the destruction being inflicted on an innocent world. The hegemony ships were methodically destroying every sign of civilization, turning cities into craters and forests into ash. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Zelani survivors, announced the communications officer. They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance for their remaining population centers. Tell them help is on the way, Harrison replied, then turned to his tactical display. All ships implement Battle Plan Alpha. Strike groups, move to your assigned positions. The human fleet split into 7 different groups, each heading toward a different section of the hegemony formation. The enemy ships, so focused on their bombardment of the planet, didn't notice the approaching human vessels until it was too late. Captain Hayes led the first attack, her stealth destroyer emerging from cloak directly behind the hegemony flagship. The Shadow Strike's torpedo tubes unleashed their full payload at point-blank range. The nuclear warheads detonating against the enemy ship's shields in brilliant flashes of light. The hegemony flagship staggered under the impact, its shields flickering and failing as secondary explosions rippled along its hull. The bridge crew of the Earth's Wrath watched in satisfaction as the massive enemy vessel began to drift, its command structure crippled by the surprise attack. "All strike groups, commence firing," Harrison ordered, and the space around Kepler 442b erupted in violence. The dreadnought Retribution opened fire with its main batteries, sending streams of kinetic projectiles toward the nearest enemy vessels. The hegemony ships, designed to handle energy weapons, were unprepared for the devastating impact of solid projectiles. Traveling at significant fractions of light speed, Captain Rodriguez watched with grim satisfaction as her ships' weapons punched through enemy shields and armor like they were made of paper. "Target their propulsion systems," she ordered. "I want them dead in space." The hegemony forces, caught completely off guard by the human attack, struggled to reorganize their formation. Their commanders, accustomed to facing defenseless targets, found themselves dealing with an enemy that not only fought back, but did so with tactics they had never encountered. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Wright led the boarding parties that followed the initial attack. His Marines, equipped with powered armor and advanced weapons, stormed aboard disabled hegemony vessels to prevent them from self-destructing or calling for reinforcements. The close-quarters combat was brutal and decisive. The hegemony soldiers, bred for intimidation and overwhelming force, were no match for human Marines fighting with the fury of those defending innocent lives. Wright's forces secured ship after ship, gathering intelligence and ensuring that the enemy couldn't recover from their initial losses. Meanwhile, Captain Rebecca Thompson commanded the medical ship Mercy, working to evacuate Zelani survivors from the planet's surface. Her crew, including Dr. Angela Morris and dozens of medical personnel, risked their lives to save as many civilians as possible while the battle raged around them. "We've got another refugee ship coming up from the surface," reported Thompson's sensors officer. "It's badly damaged and losing life support. All available shuttles provide escort and assistance," Thompson ordered. "We're not losing anyone today." The tide of battle began to turn as the human fleet's superior tactics and determination overcame the hegemony's numerical advantage. Enemy ships found themselves isolated and surrounded, their rigid formation broken by the fluid movements of the human strike groups. Admiral Harrison watched the tactical display with growing confidence. The plan was working, but he knew the hardest part was yet to come. The hegemony had reinforcements throughout the galaxy, and this victory would only be the beginning of a much larger conflict. "Signal all ships," Harrison ordered. "Prepare for the next phase of the operation. We're going to make sure the hegemony remembers this day for the rest of their existence." The battle for Kepler 442b had been raging for 6 hours, and the space around the planet was littered with the wreckage of both human and hegemony vessels. But the tide was clearly turning in favor of the human fleet, whose unconventional tactics and fierce determination had caught the enemy completely off guard. Admiral Harrison stood on the bridge of Earth's Wrath, watching as another hegemony cruiser succumbed to the combined firepower of 3 human destroyers. The enemy ships, designed for overwhelming frontal assaults against defenseless targets, proved surprisingly vulnerable when faced with coordinated attacks from multiple directions. "Admiral, we're receiving intelligence reports from the boarding parties," reported Commander Foster. "The hegemony consists of 6 different species, each with their own military traditions and command structures. They're having trouble coordinating their response to our attacks." Harrison nodded, understanding the significance of this information. The hegemony's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their diverse military capabilities made them formidable against individual opponents. But the complexity of coordinating multiple species in combat was proving to be a significant disadvantage. Lieutenant, Colonel Sam Wright's voice crackled over the communication system from aboard a captured hegemony vessel. Admiral, we've secured the enemy ship and accessed their computer systems. The intelligence we're gathering is incredible. They have detailed records of every species they've conquered. Over the past 1,000 years, Wright's Marines had proven devastatingly effective in ship-to-ship combat. The hegemony forces, accustomed to using overwhelming firepower to crush resistance, were unprepared for the close-quarters fighting that human soldiers excelled at. Their rigid military doctrine had no answer for the creativity and adaptability that characterized human warfare. The enemy soldiers we've captured are mostly conscripts from conquered species, Wright continued. They're fighting because they have to, not because they want to. Many of them are surrendering as soon as they realize we're not going to execute them. This revelation changed everything. The hegemony wasn't just a military alliance of willing participants. It was a slave empire that forced its conquered subjects to fight in their wars. The knowledge that they were fighting to free not just the Zelani, but countless other enslaved species gave the human forces an even greater sense of purpose. Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the Retribution in a devastating assault against the hegemony's main battle line. Her dreadnought's weapons had been specifically designed to punch through the energy shields that the enemy relied on for protection. The kinetic projectiles from her main guns traveled at such high velocity that they simply overwhelmed the enemy's defensive systems. Target the command ship in the center of their formation, Rodriguez ordered her weapons officer. I want to send a message that humanity doesn't negotiate with those who commit genocide. The Retribution's main batteries opened fire, sending a stream of projectiles toward the massive hegemony command vessel. The enemy ship's shields flared and collapsed under the bombardment, and the follow-up missiles found their mark, detonating deep within the vessel's hull. The destruction of the command ship sent shockwaves through the hegemony formation. Without central coordination, the various species that made up their fleet began reverting to their individual tactical doctrines, creating gaps and weaknesses that the human forces were quick to exploit. Captain Derek Martinez led his fighter squadron through one of these gaps, targeting the hegemony's communications arrays and sensor systems. His pilots, trained for this exact type of mission, struck with precision and speed, blinding the enemy fleet and preventing them from coordinating their defense. All fighters, target their escort vessels, Martinez ordered over the squadron. Frequency, keep their big ships isolated and vulnerable to our capital ships. The fighter attack was devastating in its effectiveness. The hegemony had grown accustomed to facing enemies without significant fighter capabilities, and their anti-fighter defenses were inadequate against the swarm of human attack craft. Within minutes, a dozen enemy escort vessels had been destroyed or disabled, leaving their larger ships exposed to attack. Meanwhile, Captain Rebecca Thompson continued her dangerous mission to evacuate Zelani survivors from the planet's surface. Her medical ship Mercy had taken significant damage from enemy fire, but her crew refused to abandon their rescue operations. We've got another group of refugees at coordinates 77 Alpha, reported her sensors officer. Estimated 300 survivors, mostly civilians. Take us down, Thompson ordered without hesitation. Dr. Morris, prepare the medical bay for incoming casualties. Dr. Angela Morris and her medical team worked tirelessly to treat the wounded Zelani refugees. The aliens' physiology was similar enough to humans that most of their medical equipment could be adapted for use on the survivors. More importantly, the Zelani medical data that had been transmitted with their original distress call had allowed Morris to prepare specific treatments for their injuries. The rescue operations were dangerous and exhausting, but they provided something invaluable: hope. The Yalani survivors, who had watched their world being destroyed and their people slaughtered, suddenly found themselves being saved by aliens who had traveled across the galaxy to help them. Elders Eshtai, who had managed to escape the planets. Surface aboard one of the last refugee ships, stood on the bridge of the Mercy and watched human soldiers risk their lives to save his people. Tears streamed down his face as he spoke to Captain Thompson. "We sent our call into the darkness, expecting silence," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Instead, we found beings of light who came to our aid without asking for anything in return. The universe is not as dark as we thought." The turning point of the battle came when Admiral Harrison implemented Operation Broken Chain, a coordinated strike against the remaining hegemony command vessels. The plan required perfect timing and coordination between all human forces, but the payoff would be the complete collapse of enemy resistance. "All strike groups, prepare for final assault," Harrison announced over the fleet communication system. "We're going to end this war today." The attack began with Captain Hayes' stealth destroyer Shadow Strike, emerging from cloak directly behind the hegemony's second command ship. Her torpedo spread detonated simultaneously, overwhelming the enemy vessel's shields and causing massive internal damage. At the same moment, the Retribution and her escort vessels launched a frontal assault against the largest remaining hegemony ship. The combined firepower of the human task force was devastating, and the enemy vessel began to break apart under the bombardment. Fighter squadrons led by Martinez swept through the enemy formation, targeting communications equipment and command centers. The hegemony fleet, already struggling with coordination problems, found itself completely blind and leaderless. The final blow came when Wright's Marines, having secured multiple enemy vessels, turned their captured ships' weapons against their former fleet. A sight of hegemony vessels firing on their own forces was the breaking point for enemy morale. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender signals from multiple enemy ships," reported the communications officer. "They're requesting terms." Harrison looked at the tactical display, seeing the remnants of the once mighty hegemony fleet scattered and broken. Of the 147 ships that had been systematically destroying the Zalani homeworld, fewer than 30 remained operational, and most of those were requesting permission to surrender. "All ships cease fire," Harrison ordered. "Signal the enemy vessels that their surrender is accepted, but they will be held accountable for their crimes against innocent civilians." The battle for Kepler 442b was over, but Harrison knew that this was just the beginning. The hegemony still controlled vast territories throughout the galaxy, and their defeat here would bring swift retaliation. But for now, humanity had saved an entire species from extinction and proven that the galaxy's greatest predators could be defeated. As the human fleet began the process of securing the system and caring for the Zalani survivors, news of the victory spread throughout human space. Earth's colonies celebrated, but they also prepared for the war they knew was coming. The hegemony would not forget this defeat, and humanity would need to be ready for their response. The tide had turned, but the war for galactic freedom was just beginning. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the galaxy had begun to change in ways that no one could have predicted. News of the hegemony's crushing defeat had spread like wildfire through the underground networks of enslaved species, carried by traders, refugees, and the few free civilizations that still existed on the galaxy's outer rim. Admiral Helen Carter stood in the command center of the newly established New Zalani colony, watching as human and alien engineers worked together to construct the first permanent settlement for the Zalani survivors. The planet, located in a system just 12 light-years from Earth, had been chosen specifically for its similarity to the Zalani homeworld. Dr. Carol Hayes had established the first human-alien research facility on the planet's surface, where teams of scientists from both species worked to understand each other's technology and biology. The collaboration had already produced remarkable results, with Zalani biotechnology being adapted for human use, and human engineering being applied to Zalani problems. The agricultural systems are exceeding all expectations, Carrel reported to Admiral Carter during their daily briefing. Zalani biological techniques have increased crop yields by 300%, while human engineering has created distribution systems that can feed the entire colony population. The success of the human-Zalani partnership had become a model for other species seeking to break free from hegemony control. Captain Jake Morrison, promoted to command the exploration ship New Horizons, had led the first joint human-Zalani expedition to contact other oppressed civilizations. Their first successful contact had been with the Yulton, a species of master engineers who had been enslaved by the hegemony for over 2 centuries. The Yulton had been forced to build the massive ships and weapons that the hegemony used to conquer other worlds, but their knowledge of enemy technology proved invaluable to the growing alliance. The Yulton ship designs are incredible, reported Captain Morrison from his position aboard the New Horizons. They've been secretly building weaknesses into every hegemony vessel they've constructed. If we can coordinate our attacks properly, we can exploit these vulnerabilities to devastating effect. The second species to join the growing alliance was the Prex, a civilization of warrior poets who had been fighting a guerrilla war against the hegemony for over 50 years. Their knowledge of hegemony tactics and their experience in unconventional warfare made them perfect partners for human military forces. Commander Steve Parker had been working with Prex military leaders to develop new strategies for fighting the hegemony's remaining forces. The Prex had managed to maintain their independence by constantly moving and striking at enemy supply lines, never allowing the hegemony to bring their full strength to bear. The Prex have identified 17 different hegemony supply depots throughout this sector, Parker reported to Admiral Carter. If we can coordinate simultaneous attacks on all of them, we can cripple their ability to maintain their forces in this region. Back on Earth, President Nathan Cole addressed the expanded United Earth Assembly, which now included representatives from humanity's new alien allies. The chamber that had once housed only human delegates now buzzed with the sounds of multiple languages and the sight of beings from different worlds working together toward a common goal. 6 months ago, we received a desperate call from the darkness of space. President Cole continued, his voice carrying to representatives from 4 different species. That call changed everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. Today, we stand together not as conquerors, but as liberators fighting for the freedom of all sentient life. The assembly hall erupted in applause, with humans clapping alongside the melodic chiming sounds that Zalani made to show approval, the rhythmic tapping that Yulton used for agreement, and the harmonic humming that represented Prex solidarity. Elder Zeshtai, now serving as the first alien ambassador to Earth, rose to address the assembly. His presence at the podium represented a historic moment that would be remembered for generations. When my people sent our final message into the void, we did not expect an answer, he said, his translated words carrying deep emotion. We certainly did not expect that answer to come in the form of warriors willing to die for strangers they had never met. Humanity has shown us that the universe contains more than predators and prey. It contains heroes. The political implications of the alliance were staggering. Earth's shipyards worked at maximum capacity, producing new vessels based on the combined technologies of all alliance members. The new ships were faster, more powerful, and more versatile than anything any single species could have built alone. Admiral Ben Harrison had been promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of what was now called the Liberation Armada. The force had grown from the original 57 human ships to over 200 vessels representing 4 different species, each contributing their unique strengths to the common cause. Our intelligence suggests that the hegemony is preparing a massive counterattack, Harrison reported to the Joint Military Council. They're pulling forces from across the galaxy to assemble the largest fleet in their history. They intend to crush our alliance before it can grow any stronger. Captain Elena Rodriguez, now commanding a mixed squadron of human, Zelani, and Yelton vessels, had been testing the new joint tactical doctrines. The results were promising, with each species' strengths compensating for the other's weaknesses. The Zelani ships are incredibly fast and maneuverable, Rodriguez explained. The Yelton vessels have defensive systems that are nearly impenetrable. The Prek ships are perfect for hit-and-run attacks. Combined with human firepower and tactics, we have capabilities that far exceed the sum of our parts. Meanwhile, Lieutenant, Colonel Sam Wright had been working with warriors from all Alliance species to develop new approaches to boarding actions and ground combat. The diversity of the Allied forces had created opportunities for tactics that no single species could have imagined. The Prex warriors are natural infiltrators, Wright reported. The Yelton engineers can disable any ship system in minutes. The Zelani have an intuitive understanding of ship layouts that makes them perfect guides. We're not just fighting as separate forces anymore. We're fighting as one unified army. Dr. Angela Morris had established medical facilities throughout Alliance. Space, training personnel from all species in the treatment of injuries sustained by their allies. The medical exchange had led to breakthroughs that benefited everyone, with Zelani healing techniques being combined with human surgical methods and Yulten biotechnology. Kate Reynolds, now serving as the Alliance's chief intelligence officer, had been coordinating with resistance movements throughout hegemony space. The network of information and support had grown to include dozens of enslaved species, all working to undermine their oppressors from within. We're receiving reports of uprisings on 17 different worlds, Reynolds announced during the weekly intelligence briefing. The hegemony is having to divert significant forces just to maintain control of their existing territories. The liberation campaigns had become increasingly successful as the Alliance learned to exploit the hegemony's weaknesses. Captain Derek Martinez led joint fighter squadrons that could strike deep into enemy territory and escape before the hegemony could mount an effective response. Captain Rebecca Thompson commanded the hospital ship Unity, which had become a symbol of hope throughout the galaxy. Her mixed crew of human and alien medical personnel provided aid to anyone who needed it, regardless of species or political affiliation. We've treated over 10,000 patients from 23 different species, Thompson reported. Every life we save sends a message throughout the galaxy that the Alliance fights to preserve life, not destroy it. The psychological impact of the Alliance's actions had been as important as their military victories. For the first time in over 1,000 years, enslaved species throughout the galaxy had hoped that their oppression might end. Captain Linda Hayes commanded the stealth ship Silent Thunder, leading reconnaissance missions deep into hegemony territory. Her reports provided crucial intelligence about enemy movements and weaknesses, but they also revealed the true scope of the hegemony's crimes. The scale of their slave operations is beyond anything we imagined, Hayes reported. Entire species have been bred for specific types of labor. Some have been genetically modified to be more compliant. The hegemony isn't just conquering civilizations. They're reshaping them to serve their purposes. A revelation strengthened the Alliance's resolve and attracted new members. Each species that joined brought unique capabilities and knowledge of hegemony operations, making the Alliance stronger and more capable. Fleet Admiral Harrison stood on the bridge of the new flagship Defiance, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared to depart for the hegemony's industrial core worlds. The Liberation Armada now consisted of over 400 ships and crews from 7 different species, all united in their determination to end 1,000 years of oppression. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison, he announced over the fleet communication system. Today we begin the final campaign to free this galaxy from tyranny. We fight not for conquest or revenge, but for the simple,